Joining me today, yet again, WBSA CEO and General Secretary, as well as the IWBF Africa President, among the many hats and responsibilities that he holds on. I suppose the hair is fading, so on the top of his head. Charles Saunders, thanks so much for your time again this morning.
Thank you very much, Mark. Always an absolute pleasure to be on your show. And yes, lots been happening since COVID has gone into a reduction, should we say?
Yeah, I suppose let's talk about that reduction before we get to the actual reason for this discussion. I mean, previous conversations we've had, you've been very hesitant to commit to futures and all that kind of stuff. And you've been learning from all the various tournaments you've been going to around the world in terms of COVID bubbles and this and that bubble and all that kind of stuff, and trying to develop a series of protocols that we as sport could use here in the country. And we know from previous discussions that no one's really been picking up on that knowledge from you. But it's got to be encouraging to see what's happening in the global space from other nations around the world, getting rid of vaccine mandates, getting rid of regulations and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just a matter of time before it comes here.
Yeah, I think there's a well, in my discussions with many people, there's a global awakening that's taking place right now. And, one thing that we have to be realistic about is that this is very real, and we can't take it lightly. And although the variants that are in play right now are a lot less violent, if I can put it that way, than what we've had with the Delta and all the other variants that have come about, it's still something to be very concerned about, because it's affecting sport, and it affects sport very seriously. We've had several competitions that have taken place since the oncome of the Omicron virus, and it affected the Basketball African League, where we had two teams that were totally infected, and as a result of policy, what basically happens if there's six or more players that are infected with the actual virus, then they cannot participate in the competition. So a lot of money spent with these teams traveling, and a lot of investment in preparation for the Basketball African League, and of course not being able to play to qualify, and that's a very sad point. And going on from the able-bodied side of it, the wheelchair side has just been affected just as much. And we have to take that as a reality. We've got to realize that protocols still got to exist in sport, and we've got to enforce these protocols. So the mandatory PCR test before arrival in the country, the rapid antigen tests 24 hours after arrival, going into competition prior to the start of the actual games itself, another rapid antigen test, and of course the protocol 48 hours before they leave. We've been affected by it. South Africa's teams have been struggling with it as well. We had the problem in the Basketball African League with the Cape Town Tigers, where two players were infected. We had with our national team now 4 players that were infected, and it affects your performance. It's also psychological, because the aspect as well, we've been in close contact, therefore we could also be infected. And the sad part behind it is that you've got to invoke the quarantine system, or the isolation system is what they call it. And that isolation could take anything up from 4 to 10 days of being in isolation, depending once again on the results that come through from the PCR test, which are every 48 hours. So it affects it. It's a mental disease at the moment, if I can say mental. It affects the capacity of worry, those that have to be left behind when the tournament finishes, the medical side behind it, the cost factor behind it. It's real. And we in South Africa are fairly lucky. It's our summer months at the moment. And Africa is fairly lucky and per se, because of the climate that we actually have. But once you start going north into Morocco, where it's now gone back to a level 5, no travel in, no travel out. You look at Europe right now. Europe are in a severe state with the viruses that are coming out, and of course USA are struggling exactly worse than what they have in prior cases. The saving grace, I believe, is the fact that not many people are now passing away from this variant. They get sick, and it's a flu-like systems, and yes, it's very contagious. It's airborne. The science is saying that 6 minutes in a room with a person that has COVID, Omicron will guarantee to catch it. But it's not affecting livelihoods as much as what it was doing, apart from the fact that the economy is still struggling because of it. But yes, it's one of those things, and all can be grateful for that this particular variant at the moment is not causing the death rate as what the past variants have been done. That's the positive outcome, I think.
Also, some positives out of it, and hopefully we, like you said, there's a bit of an awakening taking place, and we're seeing a lot more countries getting rid of mandates, etc. So hopefully we'll see that expand a little bit more, and as a result, sport then to re-establish itself in terms of the events, the matches, the status quo that we were used to many years ago. It's almost becoming that conversation. Remember all those years back when we used to. One of those frightening. We're almost becoming sports.
And how sad. I mean, end of this month is 2 years. It's how crazy is this?
Absolutely. But let's talk positive stuff. Let's talk 2022 IWBF Africa World Championship qualifiers. I suppose, I mean, it was recently held in Ethiopia, end of January to be specific. I suppose the negative of it all is that there was only 3 women's teams and 5 men's teams that arrived. Very much to do with, as you've mentioned in your discussion earlier, to do with the pandemic and obviously the financial aspect that the pandemic has allowed, or that has now crept into sport, crept into business, where people just don't have the money anymore because of the cost factors of coming, staying, the quarantines and all of those kind of things that come into it. But so 8 teams arrive. Looking at the event itself, I mean, just high level, just talking from an outsider point of view, 8 nations of, let's call it 5 nations out of 54 arriving at the tournament. Pretty poor showing in terms of a Africa World Championship qualifiers, if we sort of start with an opening statement.
Well, normally a country has the capacity of 8 men teams and 6 women teams. It's something that has happened. Unless you are well flushed, then you can start going to your 16 team competition brackets. But many countries in Africa don't have that finance, and that's where the first problem comes about. So what we've done is we've broken Africa up into 5 regions. And out of the 5 regions, you qualify through those regions as the best team that then comes forward. Sadly, Algeria was at the tournament, but 7 people positive cases and could not participate in the tournament after 4 opportunities of having different various tests. They could not play within. They forfeited the first 3 games, which resulted in, unfortunately, forfeiting the tournament. The likes of Morocco with travel bans and prior to leaving shut down completely, so they couldn't get on the plane and travel to Ethiopia. Kenya had a very similar incident where their flights were diverted, and as a result of that, the cost factor to rebook the flights, and that was far too much, and Kenya had to withdraw. This kind of affects everything in a grand scale. We are not isolated and alone in this problem. We had the Turkish national team in the European Championships, which was 2 months prior to this competition taking place, that are and have been the champions of the European, or EuroLeague as it's known as, whom had to withdraw both men and women teams from participating into the competition purely because of the full team being COVID infected. So it's right around. USA are struggling in the same basis as what we are talking about. Canada's got the same problem. Brazil's got the same problem. It's a reality that we faced with. The mere fact that we were able to run a tournament under these conditions, first of all, is a blessing. Was the strength to the strength that we expected? The answer is absolutely no. The champions and runner-ups of Africa were not at the tournament. The quality of basketball was still at a particular level. And what was very encouraging as well is new nations that were in attendance. And this is something which we haven't seen before. And of course, what is very sad right now is that many of the countries that would have been there was a resultant of country policy on COVID, which stopped them from traveling.
Okay.
And that is what really affected our tournament. Otherwise, we would have had around about 16 teams in competition, which we were very excited about. It would be the first time ever in the history of Africa to do this. We would have had all the top teams in Africa present, and of course, a lot of new nations as well, which we've been working on over the last 2 years and have been encouraging to turn around and say that we've climbed to 22 nations in Africa now playing wheelchair basketball on a continuous basis. Compared from the 8 nations that were playing before I came in as president of the organization. So it is encouraging. What is even more encouraging is the youth development, which I'm seeing. Ethiopia, first time ever, being a member for less than 7 months, 8 months, put up their hand to host this tournament. A lot of work that was done. I have to turn around and say that the sports ministry really and truly stepped up to the mark, as did the city, and they hosted a tournament under very difficult circumstances, and was successful in what they did. The exciting part behind it is now I can use Ethiopia as an East Coast hub to run all East Coast region competition, which is very exciting as well, and I'm very happy about that. Apart from that, we've a lot of it was teething problems. Travel bans have affected us quite seriously, and we don't actually realize it until a competition takes place, and you find that the country books its flights, it books everything of the sort, and the airlines cancel. And this is something that we've got to live with, and I think this will be with us for the next year or so as well. And we've got to be very careful of when we plan these particular tournaments, because we're finding out that if we're planning in winter months, say goodbye to the tournament. If we're planning in summer months, we tend to have a window period of around about 20, 25 days that we can run a tournament. So it comes with its challenges, but the one thing that Africa can say is that we've hosted now the 3-on-3 Commonwealth qualifiers, which South Africa men and women qualified for. We tried to host the under-23 World Cup qualifiers, which unfortunately had to be postponed because of COVID and because of the fact that as we were hosting, so the Omicron virus was made its presence.
Yeah.
And again, because of Europe's decision on banning all flights into South Africa and so forth, so many of the countries took the same, how can I say it, same direction.
Course of action,
course of action, and the sitting with 5 countries coming to Africa for the under-23, suddenly we had 1 country that appeared. And this was unfair, so we had to postpone this tournament as well. But those are the realities we're faced with. I don't think it's going to go away. But what is most important is the protocols that are put in play. That is for the safety of everybody else around. It's a reality. This damn disease only makes itself present after 10 days. So you can do all your testings that you want to do. They will arrive with negative testing, PCRs, hit the country, and unfortunately, it will be in the 9th and 10th day that they arrive in South Africa and then start testing positive. And that's where the biggest problem is at the moment. So, yeah, been tough, but we're here. That's the main thing.
Through it all, you put together, you were there, the tournament was put together. Like you said, Ethiopia, very, very new nation in relative scheme of things, put on a great tournament. Having watched a couple of the games, obviously disappointing that there wasn't enough nations there. Obviously disappointing that the current champions and and next in line or runners up, previous champions were not there. So, but we now have a new set of representatives from Africa that are going to represent the continent and fly the flag. But let's talk about the tournament per se. And here I'd like you to sort of take off all those many hats that you have, and let's fly the South African flag hat. This one here. South Africa started off very well. Let me say started off very well. We were beaten by Egypt, and then regained traction, got all the way through to here we're talking men's specifically, got all the way through to the final where we met up with Egypt again. And hell, what a game. Talk us through those last couple of minutes of the game, because it was literally at 1 minute, at one point we were there, we were going to the final. We were going to represent the continent. And guess what?
Yeah, look, Mark, it's we took a very serious decision in 2020, and that was to start developing youth. It was a very difficult decision to take, and the idea was to qualify for Worlds and to qualify for Paris 2024. So what we did was we took our 16, 17 year old players, and 7 of them accompanied the South African team to this particular competition. So we went with the expectation that we would be competitive, but we did not believe that we would be in the finals. Reality is reality. We were bloody youngsters, first time ever that they've ever traveled, first of all. And secondly, that it was a young team. It was the young under 23 team with 1 or 2 of the veteran players that was put together. And they really, truly performed. It took them a game or two to get into rhythm. And once they got into rhythm, we saw the scores of 80 and 90 against the oppositions.
Yeah.
And this was encouraging for us. Against Egypt, the game plan was very, very clear. It was to stop 2 of their players. With youth on our side, they just ran them into the ground. In fact, those poor Egyptians couldn't breathe at the end of the day. The mere fact that we're playing at 500 meters higher than what we play in Johannesburg was also a factor, and something that we didn't take into consideration, that we at the 3rd highest country playing at a level that basically Peru is the only country that beats it on elevation. So people were breathing very heavily and couldn't quite understand it until we suddenly realized, hold on, wait a minute, we're playing at 2,500 meters above sea level, okay, which is quite troublesome. And I found that out when the referees were running in the morning, when they're doing their daily runs in the morning, which most of them were saying, we run 10Ks in the morning, we can't even get to 4Ks at this stage, purely because they just couldn't breathe in the thinness of the air. So those were factors that we used to our advantage, to be honest with you. We had the youth. We were able to move that youth in and out of the games. We ran the Egyptians ragged, and it was purely inexperience that lost the game. It was our game to win. The youngster did a breakaway. He went up for the basket. He turned his head to have a look and see if someone was behind him. When he looked up again, he was under the basket. He rushed his shot instead of the experience of just pulling out of it, circling back in and taking the shot. It was young spunk, and basically the youngster missed the basket, which brought us into an overtime.
And that was seconds to go.
Yeah, that was less than 6 seconds on the clock. Yes,
seconds to go. The game was, like you said, the game was ours to win. Yes. Sorry, can't go. Scores tied at the end of the game, and like you say, into overtime.
Into overtime, and again, it was basket for basket. The one thing that the coaching staff have to work on, and that's the importance of a sports psychologist now, and it's something that we need to look at going into the under-23 competition, which will take place now from the 20th to the 27th of February, is discipline, is taking your anger and putting it into the game and not expressing it in front of the referees. When you have 5 technical fouls that are put against the team, which is 10 shots, of which the Egyptians converted 6 of the 10 points, you start then questioning why we lost. And it was enthusiasm, youngsters that believed that they were right and spoke out against the referees, which resulted in technical fouls against them for questioning referees' decisions. Instead of the captain putting the team together and calming them down, this continued for 2 or 3 incidences, which punished us. And where we had the game in hand and again could have won the game, ill discipline resulted in Egypt scoring the last 2 points and winning the game. And it was purely over enthusiasm again, lack of experience, contact from behind on a breakaway basket, instead of just allowing the player to continue and score the basket, which would have meant that they still had in the region of 24 seconds left on the clock, in possession of the ball, still 2 points up. And unfortunately, as a result of it, inexperience again resulted in Egypt going to the line, missing both shots, and still winning by 2 points. So it kind of was a sobering reality that, yes, we can plan for everything, but you cannot plan for inexperience and youth enthusiasm, if I can put it that way. So yes, it was devastating. I haven't seen a bunch of young men break down in tears and just completely, totally deflated after that incident, because they knew the game was in their hands.
Yeah.
Sadly, but again, it's what it is.
But I suppose
our young ladies.
So sorry, I was just going to say, I suppose despite that experience, the negative part of the experience in not coming away as the champions, there's a lot of experience that's been gained by the youngsters, a lot of experience being gained by Team South Africa, if I could call it that, which, like you say, coming up now into February, the vast majority of that team were the under 23s. That experience should bode very well for that team, but we'll talk about the future plans. Let's talk the ladies, because the ladies, obviously a slightly easier situation because there were only essentially 3 nations in the pool to play against, but also has its own challenges when there's so few teams.
We had, if I can say, team problems within the actual team itself. There was certain incidents that had taken place which affected the morale of the team. And we saw this very clearly in the game against Ethiopia. Nothing taken away from the Ethiopian women's team. I believe give that team another 2 years and that's going to be your future champions of Africa. Those girls are big, they're strong, they're young, and they just need a little bit of development, and they will definitely be champions of Africa. Taking that, our women's team did not perform on the basis of what they were performing in South Africa. The women's team were taking on our men's team and really truly challenging the men's team. So the concern that took place was we again had to look at several aspects on why. We picked up that there were certain problems within the team. We dealt with that particular matter. We brought it to a 4. They played a better game there afterwards. We changed up the coaching management staff for the game, which produced a better quality of game. But unfortunately, with 4 players that contracted COVID before we get into the finals, and the public's not really aware of this, but we work on something called classification and disability of a player. And under the classification structure, you've got to have in disability 14 points of disability on a court at a given time. Should you lose 3 or 4 of those vital players that determine your point category, you cannot play the game, because you have to start the game with 5 players. And we were very thin with our low pointers, which resulted in complete combinations, which you play within a game, was reduced to 1 set of combinations, and we ended up with only 4 players against 5 players on the court. Not a true reflection, again, of the actual quality of game, because all that the Algerians did, and nothing taken away from the Algerians, please, they are the champions of Africa, is that they just closed down the fifth man that didn't exist. And after they did that, they had free range to do what they wanted to do on the court. So these are the things that had taught different lessons as well. We went with what we thought was enough low pointers in the game to be able to sustain the combinations that we did. We ended up with 2 of our low pointers that were COVID positive, and that just changed the combinations. We just could not play on that particular level at that particular speed for 40 minutes. So yes, not a true representation of what took place, but again, another learning curve that under these circumstances, we need to now look and say, okay, what happens if, and then make plans around the if, rather than say, okay, fine, this is our strongest combinations, let's move with those combinations.
But I mean, looking at the results, I mean, despite the challenges that you mentioned, I mean, they weren't shutout games at all. I mean, they were close games. I mean, particularly, you know, the South Africa versus Algeria game, when you consider where the Algerians sit in the African hierarchy, consider where we sit in the African hierarchy. I mean, it's a pretty close game, 32-48, not a bad representation, despite, once again, all of the challenges that you mentioned going into the tournament and during the course of the tournament. But so a lot of positives coming out of the tournament for Team South Africa. I suppose now replace your South African hat and let's put the international wheelchair basketball presidential hat firmly back on your head. And the showcase of African basketball, wheelchair basketball within the context of the IWBF, huge kudos clearly got to go out to the African contingent for, first of all, getting the tournament going despite the number of nations there, and the showcase of the next generation, like you say, of young up-and-coming basketball players. It's got to be nice big feathers in the cap for you.
Yeah, look, we are, and of course it's not just myself, it's a team that works around, and that executive team really and truly did whatever they could possibly do to make things happen. Again, circumstances not in our favor, and we had to turn around and say to the Ethiopian Ministry of Sport and to the LOC that what they did and how they did it made things work. It is something that we struggled with, and we really did struggle on a daily basis with it, especially on the fact that the Algerians arrived and we had so many positive cases. The fact that they arrived with negative results and within 48 hours were positive created a huge concern for us, because they were all in the same hotel and close contact was taking place in lunches and dinners and breakfasts. That resulted in additional testing protocols that had to be put in play. It resulted in everybody isolated to their rooms during the course of the day if they were not at court playing. The hotel and the medical staff really did a tremendous job in containing everything, which I have to compliment on. And of course, the COVID protocol officer, he was running ragged by the end of the tournament, because as it was going, just had positive cases popping up all over the place, and that was the realities we had to face. So yes, at the end of the day, a good team really and truly produced what we need to produce, and as you said, kudos have to go to the support staff that was around. They really and truly did a job that made things work.
So, looking forward, those experiences banked in the bag from both a player point of view, from an official point of view, and obviously from an organization and LOC point of view. There's obviously lots to look forward to in terms of wheelchair basketball going forward. And looking at the calendar that you guys have put out, and I must stress it is an interim calendar, because obviously at any given moment, a new variant, a new whatever the case, and COVID protocols could probably kill most of what's on this calendar and the schedule that you guys have planned. But running through just a couple of the headliners, it's clear from a domestic point of view that domestic competition is about to kick off with some serious vuma behind it. We've got SA School Championships, we've got the PCCL, we've got your various cups, the D. Oliver Cup, we've got Terence de Bruin Cup, all of that building up to SA National 3-on-3 Championships in August, and then obviously National Provincial Conference games and National Provincial Final Fours taking place end of the year, October-ish. On an international level, IWBF, wow, we've got, as you've mentioned before, we've got February World Qualifiers happening here in Johannesburg. So hopefully many of the fans watching this are going to be allowed. But we'll talk about that. Even if they're not allowed, we're going to have them covered, because you're going to talk about some technology that we've spoken about before that's going to be available for them to watch the games. We've got the Under-23 World Games taking place in Japan in June. And then I suppose the big one for Commonwealth nations is the 3-on-3 IWBF Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, July through to October. That's just to mention a few. Very exciting calendar. Charles?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, the Under-23 World Games, which is planned for Chiba, Japan, has moved out now to August.
Okay.
They're under shutdown right now, so it's a big concern for us. And they've asked World Body to be able to postpone for a later date. If not, it's planned for Thailand. So there's the two open doors that still are available on that side. We can only pray and hope that it becomes their summer during that time period, and the variant drops considerably during the summer months. So there's prospect that it could still take place within the August month. If not, it will be pushed out towards November or so. So be it. It's what it is, and we will accept it with both arms. When it comes to Birmingham as well, they're also under the same type of criteria right now. I mean, the spike in England is of such a level at the moment, is causing chaos and for everybody. It's right slap bang in the middle of the summer, so we feel again that it would be okay. I know that the protocols that have been put in place for Birmingham are very, very strict, especially with the testing protocols. It will be played under the bubble once again. I'm not too sure about the spectator ratio that side there, because disability is deemed as one of the sports where there's underlying medical health problems, and it does cause a bit of a problem. So we need to be very careful about that. Again, in Ethiopia for the Under-25 World Championships in October, I believe that they've been blooded into running a tournament. So we should see around about 6 Under-25 youth teams coming through on that side, which I'm very excited about. And then, of course, the World Championships in Dubai in November. That's going to be very exciting as well, because it's a concept that of 16 men teams and 12 women teams that compete at that particular level. It's a massive competition. And from IWF Africa's side, it's given Egypt enough time to prepare and possibly get a couple of youth players inside there as well to compete at this particular level. It's going to be fairly exciting. All of these are going to be live streamed through the IWF platform, and of course through Wheelchair Basketball South Africa's platform as well. And then, of course, as you were talking, hopefully we'll be able to integrate the NBN 24 stats program into everything, and this should be really exciting, because it will be a live accountability of what's taking place with every single game, and of course grow membership. So I'm really excited about that as well.
Well, that's blooming good news, especially on the back of the fact that not many fans have literally been able to sit courtside and watch games that have been taking place in tournaments that have been taking place over the last year. So the excitement around the NBN 23 product, and in particular the fan app, the Swish app, which fans can actually download and watch these games live. They can literally get the stats and everything as the games are unfolding. And the fact that all of the games are going to be live broadcast and live streamed on the various platforms. At least we're not going to be without our wheelchair basketball fix, and we'll be able to see what's happening to the various teams and nations both domestically and internationally. Let's sort of touch as much wood as we possibly can. That the calendar, as I have in front of me, with the minor amendments that you've mentioned, is literally, we see it roll out for this year. So let's grab onto those blocks of wood and hold tight.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's great to be able to get back to the game again. I mean, we've been very fortunate in South Africa, and especially within the wheelchair basketball structure, that we've been able to contain the actual spread of the disease. But I think it's the protocols that we put in play, and those protocols will continue until this variance is completely disappeared. It works for us, so therefore, why change it? And let's continue in the same way. I know that a lot of people are extremely upset that I'm doing the number of tests that I'm doing on the individuals, but at the same time, health is for us most important to be able to continue playing at this particular level of competition. So yeah, again, I stress out there that we will continue what we need to do, and we will do what we can do within the capacity that we have to ensure that every structure from club to provincial to regional will be represented on this calendar.
Well, Charles, that's bloody hell. That's great news. I'm thrilled to hear it. I know we've been saying this and talking about this for a number of these podcast sessions, and it now looks like there is momentum. There's wind behind the sails. I wish you all the best, the team, the organizations, everyone involved, the best for the year ahead. Definitely going to get to as many of the tournaments as possible, showcase some of them, talk about them, have you back on talking about some of the outcomes of some of the tournaments real soon.
Absolutely, Mark. And I think that something that the public must start understanding is how this NBN platform actually works. And if we have some time, I'd really and truly like to do a podcast just on the NBN itself so that people become aware of it. And those that do follow the game understand how to follow the game. I think that is very, very crucial, because right now we can talk about it, we can implement it, we can do what we need to do. And of course, under the U23 qualifiers that will be taking place, we're actually going to formally launch this a big way. But I think what is most important out there is to get this knowledge on how from fans and members, because without that knowledge, people are not going to follow the sport by utilizing the actual platform itself. So the marketing campaign that we are putting together needs to be put out there, and people need to understand how it works. And I think that's very crucial for as soon as possible, we can get this out to them.
Definitely. We can definitely set up something to talk about that, and obviously do a lot more come closer to the time for the Under-23 World Championship qualifiers taking place in Mandeville later this month.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a little bit of a setback in the sense that the last couple of flash floods that have been experienced throughout the whole of Johannesburg, water basically flooded into the stadium, a foot, basically half a foot of water inside the stadium, which got onto our wooden floor. So we actually now putting up the wooden floor right now from the rot that has taken place. Going to cost us a pretty penny to replace that floor, and within the next 8 days, I've got to have a floor ready to host the competition. So we're under a little bit of pressure at the moment. But yes, the amount of water that came inside there, we took out 300 liters of water from the stadium. That hurt us. And but unfortunately, a lot of the water had got through the wooden floor and was nestled between the floor and the wood. And of course, now the hot season has started, sucked up into the wood and has buckled the floor. So right as we talk right now, they're stripping the floor. Photographs that have been sent to me is showing quite clearly that there's at least about another 100 liters of water that's underneath the floor, which they're sucking up right now. And let's hope that this El Nino, or whatever they want to call this damn rain that's coming about. I know it's important right now.
Farmers are swearing at you as we speak.
I don't need that nonsense with sport, but anyway, it's not the rain I'm concerned about. It's the severity of the storms
Yeah.
Because they're lifting the Mandeville the stadium roof, and rain is coming through that area. And I mean, 300 liters of water. Can you imagine exactly how much water came into that stadium?
Yeah.
First time in my lifetime in 21 years of being at Mandeville. So,
well, Charles, I wish you all the best in the coming days, and I look forward to catching up towards the end of February at Mandeville, and where we can see what our under 23s are going to put on. And let's talk technology, let's talk sport, let's talk youth development in the game, and the improvement of Team South Africa as we grow.
So just to let the members or the followers know, we will have spectators at the stadium, of course, under the capacity of the 50% requirement. And if you do arrive, please, unfortunately, you would need to either produce a negative PCR or otherwise a vaccination certificate to be allowed into the stadium, as is what is happening around South Africa at the moment. And that will, I think, continue for the near future, for at least the next eight or 9 months. So please, stadium doors are open, 50% capacity. We don't put a cover charge on it, okay, but we do insist that the protocols are followed.
Charles, thanks a lot. Much. And to you fans out there, you have been warned. Get your tickets, but make sure that you have all the other protocols in place.